He didn't kill Duke Hanlon, but the whole damn town wanted his blood. A cowboy named Ethan Crowley becomes a wanted man overnight, forced to flee the law, fight hired guns, and stare death in the eye, just to prove he's not the monster they say he is. This is the true tale of one man against an entire town's judgment. True Wild West Stories invites you to ride with us through this gripping story of betrayal, grit, and redemption. The gunshot shattered the night like a hammer through stained glass. Inside the Red Lantern Saloon, the yellow light of kerosene lamps flickered wildly, casting crooked shadows across a haze of smoke, sweat, and whiskey fumes. A piano tune jerked to a halt as the keys clanged off-beat, 2 seconds too late to match the bullet that had already carved silence into the room. Duke Hanlon slumped forward at the poker table, a half-lit cigar tumbling from his lips. Blood pooled quickly beneath him, staining the felt green and soaking the King of Hearts. Chairs scraped back. Somebody screamed. Somebody else ducked. And just like that, the Red Lantern turned from a saloon into a hellhole. Ethan Crowley stood at the far end of the bar, one hand still holding a glass of rye he hadn't even sipped. His face, shaded beneath the brim of a sweat-darkened hat, was all confusion and disbelief. He hadn't fired. Hell, he hadn't even been near the table. But folks weren't looking for truth. They were looking for someone to hang a noose on. And Ethan had been in the wrong place too many times to catch a break. Marshal Gideon Hale pushed through the saloon doors, coat flaring, boots pounding hard across the floorboards. His voice sliced the chaos. "Everybody back! Nobody leaves!" His eyes landed on Duke's body, then jumped to Ethan. Young, rugged, always the outsider in a town that never forgot. The murmurs began, the pointing fingers. The whispers hardened into accusations like dried mud. "I didn't shoot him," Ethan said, barely above a whisper. But it was too late. A ranch hand named Clyde stumbled in from the stables moments later, wild-eyed and breathless. "There's a damn pistol in Ethan's saddlebag, still warm, blood on the handle." Ethan's breath hitched. That's a lie. But the room had already chosen its story. Marshal Hale's jaw tightened. "Ethan Crowley, you're under arrest for the murder of Duke Hanlon." A bottle crashed somewhere behind him. Someone shouted, "Hang him now!" Another voice hollered, "He's always been trouble. Hell, his daddy was a drunk too." The Red Lantern erupted. Tables turned, fists flew. Hale reached for his iron, but Ethan moved first. Not out of violence, out of instinct. Out of survival. He spun, glass still in hand, flinging it hard against the nearest lamp. The flames coughed higher as the lamp shattered. Screams rose again, this time sharper. Smoke, sparks, distraction. Ethan bolted through the chaos, shoving past gamblers and whores and farmers reeking of tobacco. He burst through the doors, landing boot first into the dust of the main street. His horse was tied just yards away, old buck, skittish but loyal. From behind came the metallic clank of Hale's revolver being drawn. "Don't you run, Ethan!" But Ethan was already in the saddle, snapping the reins like a man whose life was 1 second from the noose. Gunfire exploded behind him. Splinters of wood burst from the hitching post. Someone screamed again. Not from pain, just fear. Ethan leaned low on the horse's neck as Buck tore through the town's front gate, hooves thundering into the open dark. They didn't wait to chase him. Voices rang out. Orders, guns, maybe even dogs. But Ethan didn't look back. He wasn't just running from a murder charge. He was running from the weight of a town that had never once believed in him. and from a dead man who might have been a bastard, sure, but didn't deserve to die like that. The wind lashed his face. Moonlight flickered on the edge of his knife, sheathed at his belt. His chest burned, not from the cold, but from the damn unfairness of it all. Behind him, the red lantern burned a little brighter than before, soaked in blood, smoke, and lies. And ahead, nothing but wilderness, nightfall, and a truth that nobody gave a damn about. But he was going to find it, or die trying. The drumming of hooves on gravel echoed like funeral thunder through the canyon. Each beat pounded deeper into Ethan Crowley's chest, drowning the rasp of his breath and the whistle of wind funneling through the cliffs of Dead Man's Bluff. Somewhere behind him, torches flickered and dogs barked, their howls snapping against the silence of the night. He pressed his back to the cold rock wall, clutching his side where blood soaked the fabric of his shirt. The wound wasn't deep, but it burned with every breath. Reminder enough that this was no nightmare. He wasn't dreaming. He was hunted. The outlaw. The fugitive. Just hours ago, he'd been nothing more than a cowhand, breaking broncs and fixing fence lines. Now, he was the prime suspect in a murder, riding into the dark with nothing but a bruised rib, a knife, and a horse that spooked too easily. A cricket sang somewhere close, then another, then silence. He froze. Boot steps, soft, deliberate, crunched on loose stone. Ethan gripped the handle of his knife. The silver edge flickered faintly beneath the sliver of moonlight. But the figure that emerged from the shadowed brush wasn't carrying a rifle. "Don't move," he growled. The silhouette halted. Then a soft voice answered, shaky but clear. "Ethan, it's me." "Clara." He blinked, lowering the blade a little. "Clara? What in God's name are you doing out here?" She stepped forward, a lantern in hand, casting a weak glow over her pale face and wild hair. "They're combing the hills for you. The whole damn town's out." "I figured." He winced, sliding down against the rock. "Didn't know they'd start so soon." Clara knelt beside him, setting down the lantern. Her fingers hovered over his side. "You're bleeding." "I'll live." He winced again. "Maybe." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind hissed through the gap in the cliffs like a rattler warning of trouble. "I saw something," she said finally, voice low. "After the shot." When the place went to hell, Ethan narrowed his eyes. "There was a man," she continued, "in a gray duster, bolting out the side door. Didn't look at anyone, didn't stop, just ran. Nobody else noticed him, too busy staring at Duke's blood on the table." His jaw clenched. "And you didn't say anything?" "I did, but no one listened. No one cared." Of course they didn't. In a town like theirs, once the mob made up its mind, truth became a nuisance. "You're the only one who believes me, Clara." "I don't know what to believe," she admitted, "but I saw that man. And it wasn't you. I know that much." A dog barked again, closer now. The echo bounced across the canyon like a warning bell. Then came the flicker of torchlight, faint but growing stronger, crawling across the rocks like fire ants. Clara's face paled. "They're getting close." He staggered to his feet, clutching his ribs. "Go. If they catch you with me, I'm not leaving." "Clara, they already think I'm lying. They already think I'm crazy." He stared at her, saw the fear burning behind her eyes, and something else, stubbornness maybe, or something dangerously close to love. "They won't believe me," she whispered, stepping back. "No one's going to listen to me, Ethan." The light grew nearer. Flickering shapes moved along the ridge, 3, maybe 4 men, and the glow of lanterns bobbing like eyes in the dark. "I'll find a way," he muttered. "I'll find proof." "I have to," Clara nodded. "Then run. Take care of yourself." And just like that, he melted into the stone and shadow, moving like a ghost through the crevices of the bluff. Behind him, the torchlight spilled across the canyon walls, chasing his silhouette through the jagged ribs of the earth. The dogs barked louder, and the night stretched on, sharp with wind and riddled with whispers. The red lantern sat in silence, nothing more than a black skeleton against the starlit sky. Its windows were dark hollows, its porch a graveyard of broken chairs and splintered wood. The law had cleared out after the shooting, but the place still smelled like trouble. Old smoke, whiskey, and dried blood soaked into the floorboards. Ethan Crowley crouched in the alley behind the saloon, one hand resting on the worn handle of his knife, the other gripping the back door latch. He'd waited hours for the streets to empty, for the town to drift into drunken sleep. Now, with the moon hung high and the wind whistling through the gutter pipes, he slipped inside like a shadow, on a job it didn't want to finish. The hinges groaned as the door opened. Inside, the red lantern was colder than he remembered. The overturned tables, the broken lamp, the silence. It all felt like walking into a freshly dug grave. His boots creaked on the warped wood, each step a risk. But Ethan didn't come back to feel sorry. He came for the truth. He ducked behind the bar, the scent of spilled whiskey thick enough to sting his eyes. Moonlight filtered through a cracked window, glinting off shattered glass and the dull copper smear of blood where Duke Hanlon had died. And then he saw it. A scrap of cloth caught beneath a slat behind the counter, almost missed in the darkness. He knelt, fingers brushing it gently. It was a handkerchief, torn, stained deep red. Ethan brought it to his nose. Not his, not Duke's either, not from what he remembered. The blood was too fresh, the cut too deliberate. Someone had left it behind, maybe in the scuffle, maybe on purpose. But if the law found it, and found him here with it, it wouldn't matter. They'd call it evidence, and the noose would tighten. He pocketed the cloth just as the front door creaked open. Voices, low at first, then louder. Boots stomped across the floor. "Thought I saw light in here," a gruff voice said. "Damn place still stinks of gunpowder." Ethan froze. Bounty hunters. 3 of them. Shadows against the moonlit doorway, broad-shouldered and armed to the teeth. Not marshals, not lawmen. Just men who liked gold more than truth. "There he is," one shouted, pointing behind the bar. Ethan stood up fast, hands raised. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Too late," the lead one sneered. "You're carrying the murder weapon." "I'm not carrying a damn weapon." "The handkerchief," another hissed. "We saw you pocket it." "That's obstruction, boy." Ethan took a slow step back. "You don't know what you're talking about." The third man lunged. Ethan ducked, flipping a bar stool into the path of the charging brute. Wood cracked. The saloon erupted in chaos. A blade flashed, just a whisper of steel in the dark. Ethan grabbed a bottle and swung. It shattered against the man's jaw, whiskey and glass flying in a spray that stung his own face. But there were too many. A punch caught his ribs. He stumbled back into the shelves. Bottles clattered. Another blade sliced through the air, grazing his arm. The pain flared, sharp, hot. He was cornered. Another step, and they'd gut him like a pig.
In desperation, he reached for the only thing he had, a full bottle of Red Lantern rye.
He hurled it at the floor between them. Glass exploded. Whiskey splashed upward like fire without flame. The scent was overwhelming, soaking his shirt, stinging his cut. One man cursed, another slipped in the slick, and Ethan ran. He bolted for the window, shoulder first, praying the glass had already cracked in the earlier fight. It hadn't. The pane burst as he slammed through it, shards tearing at his coat, his arms. He landed hard on the dusty ground outside, coughing, blood smearing down his forearm. A familiar whinny pierced the chaos. Buck. His horse pawed the earth, tied beneath the tree line, just where Ethan had left him. Still loyal, still waiting. Behind him, the bounty hunters shouted, boots thundering toward the door. Ethan didn't wait. He launched himself into the saddle, gritting his teeth against the pain, and kicked hard. Buck reared, then tore off into the dark. Moonlight caught the broken window behind them as they vanished into the hills, leaving behind blood, whiskey, and the one piece of truth that might one day save his neck. The Rio Seco stretched before them like a ribbon of black ink, silent and glistening under a fractured moon. Its sluggish current mirrored the stars, but up close it smelled of death, stale mud, fish rot, and wet decay. Ethan Crowley stood on the bank, eyes scanning the far side, jaw clenched tight as the wind whispered through the reeds. Behind him, Clara struggled to keep her balance, her skirts heavy with dust and river mist. "Are you sure we should cross here?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "We don't got a choice," Ethan replied, voice rough. "They're herding us like cattle." Clara looked over her shoulder. Distant lights flickered between the trees. Lanterns, maybe torches, bobbing like fireflies with bad intentions. The search party wasn't far behind, and the bounty hunters wouldn't be alone next time. Buck, Ethan's horse, whinnied low. The gelding had taken a graze to the flank from one of the bounty hunter's bullets. Nothing mortal, but blood still darkened its fur. He'd limped hard the last half-mile. Ethan gave the reins a tug and led him into the water first, stepping carefully onto the silty edge. The river was cold and deeper than it looked. Within moments it was up to his thighs. Clara followed, boots sucking into the mud. "Keep your head low," he said, "and don't let go of that saddle." The three of them, man, woman, and half-lame horse, moved through the river like ghosts through a graveyard. The reeds swayed violently in the wind, clicking against one another like nervous teeth. Halfway across, a crack echoed through the night. Gunshot. Then another. Buck screamed, kicked, and reared sideways. The splash was violent. Blood bloomed in the water like red oil. "Shit!" Ethan shouted. Clara screamed and ducked behind the horse's flank as another shot tore through the reeds nearby. "They found us!" she cried. Ethan drew his revolver and fired toward the shoreline. 2, 3 blind shots into the dark. The flash lit up the river like lightning. Somewhere in the trees, a man shouted and stumbled, crashing through the brush. Another shape moved on the near bank. A figure crouched low, blade in hand, gliding toward them like a shadow on legs. Ethan dropped his gun and pulled the knife from his belt. The attacker lunged. Steel met steel, sparks flying as the blades clanged. They grappled in the shallows, water splashing, mud sucking at their boots. The man, lean, fast, eyes wild, snarled as he swung again. Ethan ducked, then shoved with all his weight.
The man tripped over a submerged rock and tumbled backward with a splash. The river took him fast. He thrashed once, shouted something garbled, and then was gone.
The only sound was the rush of water and Clara's ragged breathing. Ethan stood still, knife still raised, heart hammering. Blood dripped from his temple. He hadn't even felt the cut. Clara climbed onto the far bank first, pulling herself up with shaking arms. Ethan followed, leading Buck, who staggered behind, his wounds still weeping. Then came the silence. For a long moment they sat by the reeds catching breath, ears tuned to every gust of wind. "Do you think he drowned?" Clara asked. Ethan didn't answer. He looked out over the river where the man had vanished. No bubbles, no movement, just dark water swallowing another secret. Then came the voices, far off, but not far enough. They turned to see torches moving down the opposite bank, illuminating faces, dozens of them. Men from the town. Not just hunters now, locals, neighbors, people who used to tip their hats to Ethan, farmers with pitchforks, blacksmiths with hammers, shopkeepers with rifles they hadn't dusted off since the war. Clara stared, stunned. "They're all coming." "Yeah," Ethan muttered, tightening the saddle. "Now they think I killed one of theirs. But it was self-defense. Don't matter, Clara. They're not out for justice anymore. They're out for blood." Smoke from the gunshots still hung low in the reeds, mixing with the scent of muck and iron. A bloated fish bobbed to the surface, glassy eyes staring toward the stars. Ethan mounted Buck with a grunt, then reached a hand for Clara. "We keep moving," he said. "We find shelter. Then we figure out who's setting all this up." Clara hesitated only a second before grabbing his hand and swinging up behind him. Downstream, the river whispered their names like a curse, while behind them, the glow of torches grew brighter, casting long shadows across the mud. The hunt had widened, and now the town was coming for its own. The sky burned red. The grain barn at the edge of the field stood like a towering pyre, its wooden frames silhouetted in hellish light. Flames clawed at the night, painting the stars crimson. Smoke spiraled upward in thick coils, choking the wind, turning the moon into a pale ghost behind soot. Ethan Crowley yanked the reins hard, pulling Buck to a stop at the tree line. His breath caught. That barn, it wasn't just another structure. It was where he'd overheard whispers, found footprints that didn't match his boots, where he believed the real trail to Duke Hanlon's murder began. And now it was a goddamn bonfire. Clara pulled up beside him, eyes wide. "My God." Ethan said nothing. His jaw tightened, lips pressed to a line. Every instinct screamed too late, but his gut, the same gut that had kept him alive through cattle stampedes, knife fights, and broken treaties, said someone's covering tracks. That someone stepped out of the flame's glow with a swagger too casual for a man near fire. Warren Pike. Lean, clean-shaven, eyes like chips of glass, and a smile full of poison. He didn't run, just stood there, arms folded, watching the inferno he'd sparked. "Crowley," Warren shouted, voice lazy, smug. "You came to see your last chance at redemption go up in smoke?" Ethan swung off his horse, fists clenched. "That barn held more than wheat," Warren laughed. "Held what? Your delusions? Maybe a bloodied boot? Some dirt-stained paper no one would read?" He gestured to the flames. "Gone now. Just like your future, Clara stepped forward. You killed Duke. I saw you that night, running. Warren's face didn't twitch. He just chuckled. You think anybody's gonna listen to the preacher's daughter and the town's most wanted? Then came the whoosh, a fresh wave of flame bursting through the side of the barn, belching out heat like an oven door flung open. Clara shrieked. There's someone inside! Ethan turned. A faint silhouette moved behind the fire-glazed windows. Someone had slipped inside. Clara didn't hesitate. She ran toward the back entrance. Clara, no! But she was already in the smoke. Ethan charged after her, the heat slapping his face like a branding iron. He kicked through the rear door, coughing, eyes watering. The world inside was a nightmare, wood beams falling, embers swirling, the air thick enough to chew. Clara! He shouted, stumbling over a charred sack of grain. A muffled cry came from the far end. Clara was pinned under a fallen beam, one arm shielding her face. He lunged through the fire, ignoring the sting on his skin, the searing pain on his neck. He grabbed the beam, muscles screaming, and heaved. It shifted, just enough. She scrambled out, coughing violently. I told you not to run in here, he wheezed. You followed me, she snapped, even as she clung to him. They burst through the back exit as the roof collapsed behind them in a spray of sparks and smoke. They rolled in the dirt, both hacking, skin scorched, hair singed. Around them, ash rained down like gray snow. Warren was gone. Bastard had slipped away in the chaos, probably halfway to town already, weaving lies to the right ears. By morning, the ruins still smoldered, nothing left but a black skeleton of beams and a pile of hot dust. Then came the marshal. Hale arrived on horseback, flanked by 2 deputies and a crowd of townsfolk who hadn't slept. His eyes locked on Ethan, then on Clara, her dress torn and face streaked with soot. What the hell happened? Hale barked. Ethan stood, shoulders square despite the burns. Warren torched the barn. He's hiding something. Maybe the truth. Hale didn't flinch. He dismounted, walked slowly to the charred remains, picked up a piece of wood, still warm, and let it fall. The barn was town property, held half the season's grain. You're telling me you didn't burn it? You think I'd light a fire and run in after her? Hale looked around. The crowd murmured. A few nodded, others just stared. But then the marshal raised a hand and said clear and firm, Ethan Crowley, from this moment on, you are not just a murder suspect. You're a terrorist against this town, and I'll see you swing for it. Ethan's fists balled. You're chasing the wrong man. Then pray you find the right one before the noose finds you. The words hit harder than the smoke. Clara grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward Buck. They had to go. Again. Behind them, the barn coughed up its last breath of flame. Ash clung to their clothes, the stench of ruin thick in their lungs. And somewhere in the wind, Warren Pike was laughing. The sound of banjo strings twanged loud over the clamor of voices, laughter, and the clinking of glass mugs. The fall fair was in full swing, barrels of ale overflowing, the scent of smoked ribs and fresh cornbread thick in the air. Lanterns swayed from the poles strung across Main Street, casting soft gold light over the wooden stalls and sawdust-covered ground. Children ran screaming in delight between booths, dogs barked, and old-timers shouted over one another at the horses trotting in the paddock ring. It should have been the safest place in the county, but for Ethan Crowley, it was just another damn battlefield. He pulled his hat low, keeping his chin tucked. His clothes were dust-covered, torn at the seams, and his boots still caked with ash from the burnt barn.
But he knew what he was here for. Buck, his horse, stolen right out from under him when he and Clara had gone to ground the night before. Word was, some jackass rode him straight into the fair and tied him up next to the beer wagon like he owned him.
Ethan slipped through the crowd, passing under flags and garlands of dried corn husks, ignoring the shouts of drunk men and the perfume of sweet cider. His eyes locked on the hitch rail near the ring, and there he was, Buck, stomping his hooves, snorting as if sensing his real master. "Easy, boy," Ethan whispered, reaching for the reins. A voice boomed behind him. "You again." He turned, slow and steady, hands half raised. A butcher's son, big, red-faced, carrying a mug of ale, was pointing right at him. "That's Ethan Crowley. He's trying to steal that horse." Heads turned. Murmurs grew. Somewhere, a woman screamed. Clara, from across the crowd, tried to push through. "Stop! He's not—" But it was too late. Hands reached for pistols. Someone shouted, "Get the marshal!" though Hale was miles off, chasing ghosts. And then another voice cut through it all, cold, crisp, like a knife through meat. "I'll take it from here." The crowd parted. He was tall, dark duster whipping in the breeze. 2 silver-handled knives strapped to his hips, spurs gleaming. Cole Hargrove, bounty hunter. The kind who liked dragging bodies behind horses for the drama. "Crowley," Cole said, cracking his neck. "I was hoping for a quiet drink, but shit, I'll take blood." Ethan's eyes flicked to Clara. "Don't interfere." He stepped forward, slow. "Not here. Not now," Cole grinned. "Then run. Give me a reason to paint this fair red." The crowd formed a ring without needing to be told. The music stopped. Even the drunkest farmer sobered up at the sight of Hargrove unsheathing one of his blades. Ethan didn't draw. He rolled his shoulders, eyes locked. "If I win, I walk." "You won't," Cole said, then lunged. It was fast, lightning fast, blade flashing, slicing air. Ethan ducked, twisted, swung a punch. It landed. Cole staggered, then slashed at Ethan's arm, tearing his sleeve, drawing blood. The crowd gasped. Someone cheered. Ethan grabbed a corndog stand pole, snapped it in 2, using the jagged edge as a makeshift blade. He parried, deflected, ducked another slash. The fight spun into the ring of the crowd, knocking over chairs, tripping into a beer keg. Blood splattered onto the wooden planks. Cole lunged again, too cocky. Ethan sidestepped, jammed the sharp pole edge into his shoulder. The bounty hunter howled, but before Ethan could follow through, 2 men from the crowd grabbed his arms. "Murderer!" one shouted. "He stabbed Cole." "I saw him light that barn," another screamed. Clara ran up, pushing past, trying to explain, but no one cared. The story had already written itself. Ethan tore free, shoving one man into a barrel. In the chaos, he bolted, leapt over a vendor's cart, crashed through a curtain booth, and ducked around the back of the pie stall. Buck was still there, thrashing. Ethan jumped onto the saddle bareback, ignoring the sting in his arm. Clara grabbed the stirrup, swung up behind him just as someone fired a shot into the air. "Go!" she yelled, and Buck ran. Out past the ring, down the road, hoofbeats thunderous over the screams behind them. Firecrackers popped from the still-going fair, mingling with panicked shouts and stunned silence. Back at the ring, Cole Hargrove stood up, holding his wounded arm. "Next time, Crowley," he muttered, wiping blood from his chin. "You bleed out." Wind howled through the cracks of the sagging wooden shack, carrying with it the scent of wet pine. and the distant howl of a lone coyote. The lantern on the crooked table flickered with every gust, its flame dim and uncertain, like the life of the man who sat hunched beneath it. A weak, raspy voice called out, "Ethan? That you, boy?" Ethan stepped inside, ducking under the warped doorframe. Behind him, Clara lingered by the entrance, scanning the woods with wary eyes. Amos Baird sat in a rocking chair that barely creaked anymore, the woods swollen with time and rain. His hands trembled as he reached for a cup that wasn't there. His face looked like dried leather, eyes cloudy with age, but still holding a glint of recognition. "I didn't think you'd make it," Amos whispered. "They've been watching this place for weeks." "I came quiet," Ethan said, stepping forward. "Ain't nobody followed." Clara finally entered, her boots thudding softly on the warped floorboards. The shack was no more than 4 walls, a stove, and a cot covered in patchwork quilts. But for now it was shelter. Ethan knelt beside the old man. "You said you saw what happened." The night Duke died, Amos's hands shook harder. He stared at the floor, as if the planks themselves held judgment. "I didn't mean to be there. Just looking for warmth. Found a way under the floorboards of Red Lantern." Ethan's pulse quickened. "You were there?" "I saw it." Warren Pike slid the ace from his sleeve. Duke caught him, raised hell. Then Warren pulled the iron, shot him point blank. "And you didn't tell a soul?" Clara asked, disbelief dripping from her voice. Amos flinched. "Warren's got people everywhere. I talk, I vanish." Ethan clenched his fists. "So instead, I get blamed. And you sit here hiding like a goddamn ghost." Amos coughed, long and hollow. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I truly am. But I ain't got much time left. And I figured maybe that was the safest bet, for all of us." Outside, a twig snapped. Clara's hand flew to her pistol. Ethan moved to the window, pulling back a moth-eaten curtain. Shadows moved beyond the tree line, too many for coyotes. "Move," Ethan hissed. "They're here." Too late. The door burst open with a thunderous crack, and 2 armed men rushed in, bandanas over their faces. Warren's men. "Back off!" Ethan shouted, firing once. The shot grazed the first man's shoulder, sending him tumbling into the table. Clara ducked and fired twice more, forcing the second to dive behind the stove. Amos, panicked, tried to stand but fell against the wall. A third man appeared in the doorway, firing blindly. One shot hit Amos square in the chest. "No!" Ethan roared, emptying his revolver as the attackers scrambled out. The shack was filled with smoke and the stench of gunpowder. Amos gasped, a crimson stain spreading across his shirt, soaking into the wood beneath him. Ethan dropped beside him, trying to press against the wound. "Stay with me, Amos." Amos wheezed, eyes wide with pain. Tell them what I said about Warren." "I will," Ethan promised, voice breaking. "I swear it." The old man smiled faintly, then went still, mouth slightly open, eyes staring at something far away. Clara touched Ethan's shoulder. "We have to go. They'll circle back with more." He stood slowly, hands sticky with blood. For a moment he just looked around the shack, wind still whistling through the walls, the lantern sputtering its last breath. Outside, their horses stomped nervously. They mounted quickly, Ethan's face blank, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Behind them, the shack shrank into the darkness, a wooden tomb for a man too late to save. As they galloped into the night, Clara glanced back, voice soft. He died trying to do the right thing. Ethan didn't answer, but in his chest something burned, not just grief, not just guilt, something sharper, resolve. The old church bell tolled once, long and somber, echoing a long time of the unities of self. The old church bell tolled once, long and somber, echoing through the empty valley like a funeral cry. Inside the wooden chapel, everything was still, too still. The only light came from a scattering of candles near the altar, their flames swaying like frightened dancers in the drafty dark. Clara stood at the foot of the altar, hands trembling at her sides, breath caught in her throat. The scent of burning beeswax mingled with old wood and the faint must of mildew. Her eyes flicked to the carved figure of a weeping saint overhead, its gaze heavy, judgmental. A cold edge pressed to her throat. "Not a word," Warren Pike whispered, the curved blade biting just enough to let her feel its kiss. Clara froze. She didn't dare nod, didn't dare breathe too deeply. She had come here hoping to light a candle in secret, to pray for Ethan's safety, or perhaps for her own clarity. Instead, she found Warren waiting like a snake coiled in shadow. Outside, in the shadows behind the church, Ethan knelt in the wet grass, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Through the warped, stained glass he could see movement, Warren's silhouette close to Clara's. His fingers tightened around the grip of his revolver. One clean shot. That's all he needed. But the angle was wrong, the risk too high. Inside, Warren leaned in, his breath sour with whiskey and rot. "You think whisperin' to a marshal's gonna save your little cowboy?" he sneered. "They all follow orders. And right now, the order is hunt Ethan Crowley, dead or worse." Clara's voice shook. "Marshal Hale, he's not blind." "No," Warren said, pressing the blade harder. "But he's comfortable. And men like that don't see truth unless it's burnin' their porch." Footsteps echoed outside the chapel, measured, official. Marshal Hale entered through the back, lantern in hand. His boots clicked against the wood floor, the light casting long shadows across the pews. Warren pulled Clara backward into the alcove behind the pulpit, one hand clamped over her mouth, blade still at her throat. She whimpered against his palm, eyes wide with panic. Hale paused, squinting. "Someone lit candles?" he muttered, his voice cutting the silence. He stepped closer to the altar, then stopped. He turned, eyes scanning the pews, the corners. Strange. Outside, Ethan could hear everything. Hale's voice, Clara's muffled sobs, the whisper of steel. He gritted his teeth. Do something, damn it. But if he burst in, Clara might not survive the first second. If he waited, it might already be too late. Back inside, Hale turned on his heel to leave, but hesitated. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "Ballistics came back," he said aloud to himself. Bullet pulled from Duke's body didn't match Ethan's revolver. Grooves were too shallow, not factory-made. Warren's eyes narrowed in the dark. He didn't expect that. Hale slipped the note back into his pocket and turned toward the doors. That hesitation bought Clara just enough breath to dig her heel into Warren's foot. He cursed, dropping his hand from her mouth for a split second. She gasped, "Marshal!" Too late. Warren yanked her back, knife now turned to press against her ribs. Ethan saw the movement through the cracked side window. His heart jumped into his throat. Then movement. The front doors slammed open. Hale turned back, startled, just in time to see Warren dragging Clara sideways through the rear vestry door, blade glinting in candlelight. "Stop!" Hale barked, drawing his sidearm. But Warren was already through the back, vanishing into the shadows behind the church. Ethan sprinted around the corner, gun drawing, but he was too slow. All he caught was the echo of laughter and Clara's muffled cries. Inside the church, the candles sputtered, their wax pooling like tears on the altar. Marshal Hale stood still for a long moment, hand still on his holster, brows furrowed. Something was wrong, something deeper than he'd wanted to believe. Outside, Ethan leaned against the wooden siding, breathing hard, fists shaking. He had watched her nearly die, again. And he'd done nothing. He punched the wall once, knuckles splitting. No more running. But first, he had to find Clara. Wherever Warren was taking her, it wasn't just to scare. It was to end the story, once and for all. The candles had nearly burned themselves out, casting shaky halos of light on the warped floorboards and dust-streaked pews. The wooden church stood silent, haunted more by breath and memory than faith. Outside, the wind moaned like a widow. Inside, the devil whispered with the breath of whiskey. Warren Pike stumbled down the center aisle, bottle in hand, boots dragging, mouth mumbling. His silhouette stretched grotesque across the altar wall, warping with each flicker of dying flame. He let out a slurred chuckle that echoed too loud in the still air. "I put him down right at the damn table," he muttered, half to himself, half to the shadows. Duke and his smug mouth, always talking big, until he bled out like a stuck pig on the damn cards. Clara sat stiffly in the front pew, hands clenched in her lap, trying not to shake. Her cheek was bruised, eyes wide, tracking every staggered step Warren took. The scent of sour whiskey and sweat filled the church like a storm cloud. She didn't dare speak. Warren threw the bottle down. It bounced once, rolled, and came to rest against the pulpit with a dull thud. No one saw it. No one that matters. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, gaze unfocused. And that damn cowpoke Crowley, he was just perfect. Drunk, loud, stupid. All I had to do was drop the piece in his barn. Behind the church's side door, crouched in the shadows, Ethan heard everything. His knuckles whitened around the grip of his Colt, every muscle in his body screaming to move, to end it right here. But he stayed frozen, breath shallow, heart pounding like war drums. Clara shifted slightly, the movement making a small creak in the pew. Warren's head snapped toward her. He stumbled forward, eyes suddenly sharp and mean. "You think I wouldn't kill a woman? You think just 'cause you're pretty and soft-spoken, I won't put you next to Duke in the dirt?" He grabbed her by the arm, yanking her to her feet. "I'll make it clean," he snarled. "Hell, maybe I'll even make it look like Crowley did that too. Folks'll believe anything about him now." Clara let out a trembling gasp, her eyes darting toward the side door, toward the man she hoped was still there. Ethan, the only one who knew, the only one who hadn't given up. Warren pressed her against the pulpit, knife flashing again beneath the candlelight. "One word to Hale, to anyone, and I swear they'll be scraping you off these damn floorboards." She swallowed her scream, eyes wet with fear. Outside, Ethan moved an inch forward, just one,
enough to press his temple against the crack in the door. He could see the blade, see Warren's spit flying as he ranted, smell the rank mix of booze and violence in the air. But he didn't move. Not yet. Not without a clear shot. Inside, Warren's rage sputtered. He stepped back, wiping his face, muttering curses under his breath. Then he turned, lurching down the aisle again toward the exit, his footsteps uneven and loud. "Bitch don't know how lucky she is," he grumbled. "Could have ended tonight. Might still." He shoved open the front doors and disappeared into the night, his boots fading into the gravel. The church fell into an eerie hush. Clara collapsed into the pew, breath ragged, hands over her face. The knife clattered on the floor where Warren dropped it, its blade gleaming like a predator's smile under the flickering candlelight. The side door creaked softly. Ethan stepped in, shadows trailing him like a cloak. His gun was still drawn, though his hand trembled now. She looked up at him, eyes red and wide. "I heard everything," he said quietly. "Every damn word." She nodded, unable to speak. He looked down at the pulpit, the abandoned bottle, the knife on the floor, and then at the statue of the saint above, its wooden eyes seeming to weep in judgment. "This ain't just about survival anymore," Ethan muttered. "It's justice. For Duke, for Amos, for you." He reached for her hand, helping her up gently. She leaned into him, body limp with exhaustion, with fear. Outside, the wind rose again, tearing through the valley like a scream, and Ethan Crowley, with his soul burning hotter than ever, made one silent vow. Next time he saw Warren Pike, he wouldn't just listen. He'd end it. The upstairs of the Red Lantern pulsed with a greasy kind of luxury, too loud, too bright, and too full of men who thought their money could buy silence. Candlelight flickered against gilded mirrors, the stale scent of cigars hung in thick sheets, and the out-of-tune piano clanged a sloppy melody, barely covering the slurred jokes and cruel laughter of drunken men. Ethan adjusted the too small collar of his borrowed waiter's coat, his face shadowed beneath a tipped cap. A silver tray balanced in his hand, rattling slightly with a bottle of bourbon and 3 glasses. No one looked twice at him. The rich never did. "Keep your head down. Don't speak. Just listen," Clara had whispered before they entered. She was somewhere in the room now, dressed like one of the bar girls, lipstick too red, eyes too sharp. The upper floor was reserved for those who considered themselves untouchable. A long banquet table groaned under the weight of roasted meats, half-eaten cornbread, overfilled glasses, and forgotten poker chips. Bills of greenbacks were scattered across the table like confetti. One man used them to dab sweat from his neck. Warren Pike sat at the head of it all, arms slung over his chair, cigar perched between yellowing teeth. He laughed too loud, drank too fast, and slapped the back of every man near him like they were old war buddies. "Boys," he bellowed, "ain't it good to be the wolves instead of the sheep?" The table roared in agreement. Ethan slipped between chairs, offering drinks, eyes sharp beneath the brim. He caught bits of conversation, names, places, numbers, some meaningless, others like gunpowder waiting for flame. "Shipment coming through Elkhorn Pass. Marshal Hale? Hell, he's got his own pocket to worry about. You tell Vince the password's Blackbird. No Blackbird, no deal." There it was, a name, a password, a lead. Clara moved subtly along the edge of the room, near the old piano that hadn't been played all night. Her fingers brushed the keys, producing a sour, broken chord.
A few men grunted, waved her off, uninterested. She reached behind the fallboard, her hand disappearing into the hollow space beneath the lid. When her fingers closed around cold steel, her breath caught. She pulled it free, short, curved, a dagger with the letter W carved crudely into its hilt. She slipped it beneath her skirt, heart racing. One step closer to proving it. Warren stood suddenly, slamming his glass down. "To men who handle things like men," he roared. "And to those who don't," his voice dipped, "may they end up buried with their mouths full of dirt." The men laughed. Ethan's knuckles whitened around the tray. Then, trouble. A scuffle broke out near the corner table. One man accused another of cheating at cards. Chairs toppled, a punch flew, and in the mess of shouting and swinging fists, Warren's attention turned. Ethan moved. Quick as a shadow, he slipped behind a curtain near the hallway and ducked toward the servants' stairwell. Clara caught his movement and backed away from the piano, vanishing into the opposite end of the room. But someone else had seen. "Hey!" a gruff voice barked. "That ain't one of ours." A chair scraped back. Footsteps thundered. Ethan burst through the stairwell door, boots thudding on the old wood, tray abandoned. Down the narrow stairs, past crates of gin and sacks of flour, deeper into the belly of the Red Lantern. Shots rang out. Bang, bang. Splinters flew from the wall beside him. He dove behind a stack of barrels, rolled, and kept moving. The basement was a warren of corridors, storage rooms, old gambling dens no longer in use, and maybe, just maybe, a way out. Behind him the chase echoed like drumfire. "Get him!" He's seen too much. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps. The air was thick with dust, sweat, and the stink of moldy whiskey. Somewhere above, the piano resumed, trying to drown out the chaos. He slammed through a side door, only to find a dead end, a coal room, no windows, no back exit. Footsteps pounded closer. He turned, eyes sweeping the room. There, a rusted service hatch near the floor, barely big enough. He dropped to his knees, wrenched it open, and crawled in just as more shots tore through the door behind him. Wood shattered. A voice cursed. Then, darkness. He didn't know where the tunnel led, didn't care. The important thing was this: they knew he was close. Too close. And Warren Pike? He was starting to sweat. The old wooden bridge groaned under Ethan's boots, each plank creaking like bones ready to snap. The Rio Seco churned beneath him, muddy, swollen from last week's rains, its current a swirling mess of brown and gray. Fog curled around the banks like ghost fingers, hiding movement, swallowing sound. Ethan clutched his side, his shoulder still sore from the bullet graze he'd taken 2 nights ago. Clara followed close behind, breath shallow, coat pulled tight against the cold wind. They were almost across when the sound of hoofbeats and harsh yelling cut through the mist. "Stop! Hands up, both of you!" A figure stepped onto the far end of the bridge, revolver drawn. Deputy McReady, one of Hale's men, young, overeager, and dumb as bricks. His badge shone like a dagger in the moonlight. "I said drop your damn gun, Crowley!" Ethan didn't have his gun drawn. Hell, he wasn't even holding it. But the kid was panicked, finger already dancing on the trigger. "Easy," Ethan said, hands raised. "Ain't looking for a fight." But the bridge betrayed them. A sudden crack beneath McReady's boots, a plank splintered, half-rotted. He stumbled, cursing, trying to balance. His revolver flailed in the air, went off. Bang! The shot missed everyone, but the echo shattered the silence like glass. Clara screamed. McReady staggered again, the bridge quivering beneath him. A second plank gave way. And then he was gone.
The deputy's body crashed through the rotting wood and into the river below with a splash that seemed too loud, too final. The current swallowed him like a hungry beast. For a second, his flailing arms broke the surface, then nothing, just bubbles and the swirling filth of the Rio Seco. Ethan and Clara stood frozen. Then a new voice rang out from the shadows behind them.
Well now, that's one hell of a way to silence a lawman. Cole Hargrove stepped from the fog, saddle coat whipping in the wind. That smug smirk stretched across his scarred face. Behind him, a handful of townsfolk began to gather, drawn by the gunshot, the shouting, the sense of blood.
He came at us, Clara stammered.
The bridge, he fell.
Sure he did, Cole said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Crowley must have snatched the kid's gun. Poor bastard didn't stand a chance.
That's a damn lie,
Ethan barked. But it didn't matter. The story had already been born, and in this town, truth bled slow while lies ran fast. One of the townsmen pointed a shaky finger.
That's 2 bodies now, Crowley.
How many more 'fore you're satisfied? Another spat on the ground. Shootin' deputies, burnin' down barns. Hell, even women ain't safe around you. Clara flinched. Ethan's fists clenched, pain radiating from his wounded shoulder. You people don't know a damn thing.
Don't need to, Cole said, hand resting on his holster. We just follow the trail. And yours? It's painted in blood, son. The bridge groaned again, threatening to collapse further. Ethan grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her back toward the far side. Another shout rose. Someone had spotted the blood dripping from Ethan's sleeve. It soaked through his coat now, dark and steady, each drop hitting the wood like a drumbeat of guilt. He's wounded. Cut him off. He can't run far. No, please,
Clara cried, shielding Ethan. You don't understand. He's... But the crowd surged forward. Ethan fired a warning shot into the air, the sound cracking across the river valley like thunder. The crowd froze. Move, he growled, voice low and ragged. No one stepped forward. Not yet, but they would. He and Clara turned and ran, vanishing into the trees beyond the bridge. Behind them, the mob's anger turned into noise, shouts, curses, talk of manhunts and wanted posters, and behind that, the whisper of the river. Somewhere beneath its surface, Deputy McCready would drift, silent and forgotten. But above ground, his death had a name on it, Ethan Crowley. The bridge, now half collapsed, stood like a broken gallows behind them, silent, splintered, and soon to be burned by memory and rumor alike. The room smelled of gun oil, damp wood, and old tobacco. Marshal Hale sat behind his battered desk, cigar between his fingers, unlit, forgotten. The oil lamp to his left flickered gently, casting golden ripples over the town map pinned across the wall. Black ink lines traced streets, alleyways, river bends, but none of it answered the question burning in his mind. He leaned back, one leg crossed over the other, and stared at the ballistic report for the 3rd time that night. Bullet trajectory inconsistent with Crowley's known shooting stance. Entry angle from the left, high arc. Powder burns minimal. The marshal frowned.
Crowley ain't no angel, he muttered to no one. But he sure as hell knows how to shoot. Always from the hip, low and fast. This one was deliberate. The knock came soft but urgent. Before Hale could answer, the door creaked open and Warren Pike stepped in, boot heels clicking across the floor like a judge's gavel. "Evening, Marshal," Warren said, brushing imaginary dust from his lapel. "Heard you were burning midnight oil again." Hale didn't look up. "Something on your mind, Pike?" "Oh, nothing much. Just came to check in. Folks getting riled up after the bridge incident. Another man dead on Crowley's trail." Looks like your patience with that bastard's cost us more than time. Hale's jaw tightened. He closed the report and slid it into a drawer without a word. Warren took a slow walk around the office, pausing beside the rack of rifles. You know, he continued, voice syrupy smooth, some folks wonderin' if maybe you're getting soft. Maybe Crowley's got you second-guessing. I'd hate to think our town's lawman can't see a killer, staring him in the face. The marshal met Warren's gaze, hard and unreadable. Justice takes time. And sometimes it don't shout, it whispers. Warren chuckled. You keep listening to whispers, Hale, and this town's gonna be screaming before long. He tapped the butt of one rifle like it was a warning, then turned for the door. You need help bringing him in. You let me know. I got men. I got reach. And I ain't got your hesitation. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence returned, thick as molasses. Hale stared at the map again, tracing the locations in his mind. Red Lantern, Dead Man's Bluff, the old bridge. Too many bodies, too much blood, and too damn convenient. He reached into the drawer, pulled the report out once more, and lit the cigar. The flame caught slowly, the smoke curling around his face like suspicion itself. What bothered him most wasn't Ethan's behavior. It was Warren's. Too eager, too polished. Always one step ahead, always ready to point the finger. And then there was the shell casing found near Duke's table. Wrong caliber for Ethan's revolver. That detail had slipped through the cracks, but Hale hadn't forgotten. He stared out the window. The darkness beyond seemed depressing on the glass, as if the whole damn town was holding its breath. Something was off, twisted, and it wasn't just Ethan. He reached for attack and marked another red dot on the map. Not for the death, for the doubt. The cigar smoldered in the ashtray now, forgotten again. As the marshal leaned forward, elbows on the desk, brow furrowed deep. If Warren was what he feared he might be, then this wasn't about one murder anymore. It was about control, corruption, rot from the inside. And Ethan? Maybe the kid wasn't innocent, but maybe he wasn't the devil either. The wind howled outside like a warning. Marshal Hale stood, cracked his knuckles and grabbed his hat. His badge glinted in the lamplight, dull and scratched. He didn't know where the truth would take him, but he'd stopped waiting for it to knock. As he stepped into the cold night, the cigar's last ember died, leaving behind nothing but ash and the scent of slow-burning suspicion. Wind howled through the pine trees like a pack of wolves whispering bad omens. The forest around Dead Man's Bluff had turned into a pitch-black maze, where every twig cracked like a gunshot, and every shadow moved like a ghost. Ethan Crowley moved slowly, hand on his side, breath shallow. Clara was just behind him, her coat snagged by brambles, face pale and eyes sharp. Somewhere ahead dogs howled, long, low and hungry. They were being hunted. The night was thick, wet with the scent of damp leaves and old blood. Clara suddenly stiffened. "Wait," she whispered. A metallic snap cracked the silence. Clara screamed. The forest echoed. She dropped to her knees. Her ankle was caught in a rusty iron trap buried beneath a pile of leaves. Blood leaked into her sock, and the cruel teeth of the snare bit deeper with every movement. "Goddamn bastards!" she hissed, biting back tears. "They rigged the whole goddamn woods!" Ethan dropped beside her, but she waved him off. "You go, I'll catch up." "Like hell I will," Ethan growled. But Clara, jaw clenched, reached into her coat, pulled out a short hunting knife, and began to work the trap with shaky hands.
The mechanism creaked, whined, and finally sprang open. She yanked her leg free, socks soaked, breath ragged. "Now, we go." They stumbled forward, deeper into the woods. Trees loomed like prison bars. The barking grew louder, closer. Then came the voice. "Well, well, looks like the rat still breathes." Cole Hargrove stepped out from the dark, rifle slung over his shoulder, bowie knife in one hand.
His hat was gone, and the side of his face bore an old scar that twitched when he grinned. "You made a hell of a mess, Crowley. Sheriff's got a bounty now fat enough to make a man retire in Mexico." Ethan raised his revolver. "Try me." "You're bleedin'," Cole said, amused. "That arm ain't gonna hold steady much longer." And then he charged. The fight was brutal and silent. No words, just breath, fists, steel. Cole's knife slashed across Ethan's sleeve. Blood spattered onto pine bark. Ethan swung his revolver like a hammer, catching Cole's jaw. Clara ducked behind a tree, clutching her ankle, eyes wide. They rolled through leaves and thorns, steel flashing, teeth bared. Cole brought the knife down. Ethan caught his wrist, twisted. The blade fell. Ethan drove his fist into Cole's gut, then shoved him back. A misstep. Cole slipped on wet moss and went down hard, cracking his skull on a fallen log. He didn't get up. Ethan stood, panting, blood dripping from his arm, vision swimming. Clara limped toward him. "It's over," she said, voice barely a whisper. He shook his head. "Not yet." Then came the smell, sharp, bitter like burning resin. Clara turned first. "Smoke." They both looked toward the tree line. In the distance, a faint orange glow flickered through the branches. A cabin, maybe one of the old trappers' hideouts, was up in flames. Ethan's jaw clenched. "They're not done." Crackling wood echoed in the dark. The fire spread fast. Shadows danced along the trees. Whoever set that blaze was making a signal. More were coming. Clara threw Ethan's arm over her shoulder and helped him limp away from the fading groans of Cole Hargrove. The forest no longer whispered. It roared. The flames rose like devils out of hell, licking the midnight sky with hungry tongues. The old hunting cabin groaned under the heat, dry timbers catching fast, snapping like bones. Orange light pulsed through the forest, casting wild shadows over the trees. Smoke stung Ethan's eyes as he dragged his weary body closer, Clara limping just behind him. "Over there, on the table," Clara shouted, coughing. Inside, past the thick smoke and flickering light, sat a crumpled piece of parchment, half buried under a rusted lantern. Clara snatched it up with trembling fingers, squinting through the grime. It was a letter, half burned, soaked with age, but the signature at the bottom was still visible. Amos. And above it, scratched out but legible, Warren Pike. Cheated the table. Threatened Duke. If I speak, I'll be next. Clara's eyes widened. It's his handwriting. I know it. He tried to warn someone. Ethan took the letter, running his fingers over the smudged words. Blackened oil from the lantern left smears. Prints, maybe enough. But before he could read more, the crack of a branch snapped behind them. A figure stepped out from the dark, bandana over the mouth, rifle at the ready. One of Cole Hargrove's men, still tracking them through the woods. "Say good night, Crowley." The man lit a bottle with a rag, flame licking the glass neck, and hurled it toward the cabin. The Molotov burst against the back wall. The cabin whooshed into full flame. Heat rolled over Ethan and Clara like a wave from a forge. "Shit! Move!" Ethan grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the doorway, letter still clutched tight in his fist. Timbers popped. Embers fell like burning snow.
The ceiling began to bow. Smoke poured into their lungs. Every breath clawed at their throats. Clara stumbled. Ethan lifted her up and pushed forward, just as part of the roof collapsed behind them in a roaring crash. They burst through the front, Ethan diving with her into the dirt as fire rolled out behind them like a dragon's breath. The air outside felt like ice after the inferno. Ethan rolled onto his back, clutching the charred half-letter to his chest. His fingers trembled, burned, but the paper was still intact, mostly. Clara coughed beside him, face streaked with soot. They stared at the blazing ruin. "It was proof," Clara whispered. "It still is," Ethan said. "His fingerprints are on it. His lies in ink. Maybe that's all we need." The fire lit Ethan's face in flickers, his jaw set, eyes hollow. He looked older, heavier, like a man dragging the whole damn town on his back. From the woods, more shouts echoed. Whoever set the fire wasn't done. They were still being hunted. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't feel completely alone. He held the burned paper like it was a holy relic, fragile, dying, but enough to keep going. The wind shifted, spreading the fire into the trees. Sparks floated upward like prayers, unanswered, and in the distance, another rifle cocked. The dawn bled red across the sky, like a wound torn open by the night. The sun crawled up behind the distant ridges, casting long, cruel shadows over Dead Man's Bluff. Wind screamed through the canyon, hot and dry, carrying dust and the scent of something final. Ethan stood at the cliff's edge, boots inches from the crumbling drop. Below, the world disappeared into a chasm of swirling fog and jagged rock. He tasted blood in his mouth, felt it warm on his busted lip. His breath came hard. Each step back brought him closer to death. Warren Pike stood 10 paces away, shirt torn, hair wild. His revolver trained on Ethan like a finger of judgment. His face was flushed, mad with fury and something darker. Desperation. "You run out of luck, Crowley," Warren spat, voice ragged from shouting. "You should have just taken the noose and been done with it." Ethan's eyes flicked to Clara, who was tied near a mesquite bush, bruised but alive. Her voice cracked as she screamed, "Don't do it, Warren! People are coming! Marshal Hale's on his way!" Warren barked a laugh. "Let him come! By the time they get here, this son of a bitch will be buzzard meat at the bottom of the bluff." Ethan's hand hovered over his holster, but his arm trembled, wounded and near empty. "You murdered Duke," Ethan said, each word like a hammer. "And Amos. You tried to burn every scrap of truth to the ground," Warren sneered, stepping closer. "Truth? Don't talk to me about truth. That old bastard Amos was a drunk. Duke cheated one time too many. I did what had to be done." There it was. The words ripped out without him realizing. Behind the bluff, hooves thundered, dust plumed on the horizon. Hale's voice cut the wind like a blade. "Drop the damn gun, Warren!" But Warren didn't flinch. "You think these people care?" he screamed to the growing crowd. "You think they'll believe a coward like you over me? I ran this town while you were herding cattle." Ethan drew. Warren fired. The first shots cracked like dry lightning. One bullet grazed Ethan's side. He dove left, rolled across the dusty rock, came up with his knife flashing. Warren rushed him, the two men colliding in a storm of fists and metal. Dust flew. The bluff shuddered beneath them. Ethan slashed Warren's arm.
Warren punched him square in the gut, sending Ethan stumbling back to the edge again. Clara screamed, trying to break free from the rope. Hale had dismounted, gun drawn, but couldn't get a clear shot. Steel rang against steel. Warren's blade glanced off Ethan's. The two locked eyes, one full of hatred, the other of righteous fury. "You'll hang for this," Ethan growled. "Not if you go first," Warren hissed and lunged. Ethan sidestepped at the last second. Warren's boots skidded on loose gravel. He flailed, hands grabbing nothing. "No! No!" And then he fell. His scream echoed into the abyss, fading beneath the roar of the wind. The dust swirled up in his wake, then settled. Silence. Ethan stood at the edge, chest heaving. Hale approached slowly, lowering his weapon. "You heard him," Ethan said, voice hoarse. "He confessed." The townsfolk had gathered behind Hale, murmuring, stunned. No one spoke. No one moved. Clara ran to Ethan, throwing her arms around him, tears streaking her soot-covered face. Marshal Hale nodded once, slowly. "I heard." The morning light burned brighter now, cutting through the dust and guilt like the first light after a long damn storm. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The golden light of morning spilled across the prairie, soft and wide like a warm blanket. Dew glistened on the tall grass, and the sound of cattle lowing echoed across the hills like a hymn returning to the earth. Birds rose from fence posts. The world had not ended. It had simply changed. Ethan Crowley stood by the fence line, hat low over his brow, boots damp with the breath of dawn. The sun kissed the scar still healing on his cheek, and the wind toyed with the fringe of his worn duster. Behind him, the town of Dryfield stirred. But out here, the land remembered before the pain. It smelled of wet soil, of fresh grass, and of a silence earned the hard way. Marshal Hale cleared his throat, his voice breaking the hush. The town had gathered, half in shame, half in reverence. Men removed their hats, women clasped hands. A table was set near the barn, bacon crackled, cornbread steamed, and black coffee brewed thick enough to stand a spoon in. Hale stepped forward. "I owe you more than an apology," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "I listened to fear instead of truth. I let a man like Warren twist the law for his own sins. And I let all of you," he turned to the townsfolk, "believe what was easiest." Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Then Clara walked up, shoulders squared despite the bruises that had not yet faded from her jaw. She looked every man and woman in the eye. "You saw what you wanted to see," she said calmly. "But truth don't need permission. It just needs to survive long enough to be heard." Silence again, until an old man in the back tipped his hat and muttered, "Goddamn right." A ripple passed through the crowd. Ethan didn't step forward. He didn't want thanks. He didn't want a parade. Justice wasn't glory. It was the least a man deserved when he'd lost everything else. Still, Hale turned to him, lifting his voice. "You're free, Crowley." Free and cleared. The town will file it proper. Your name is yours again. Clara turned to Ethan, her smile small but warm, eyes tired but proud. He nodded to her, deep, quiet. There were no words between them, none needed. A woman brought out plates. The grill hissed as thick cuts of meat sizzled. Children ran through the grass, tossing pebbles and laughing like the storm had never happened. But Ethan didn't sit. He walked toward the pasture, the sun to his back. His horse stood waiting near the gate, reins loose, tail flicking. Beyond them, cattle moved slow across the plain, their bodies dark against the lights. Clara watched him go. Hale did too. "Will he stay?" someone whispered. Clara didn't answer, but she knew. Ethan stopped just once. He turned, just enough to glance back at the town, at the faces watching him. He gave them nothing, no salute, no wave, just a nod, a man's nod, a survivor's nod. Then he climbed into the saddle, spurred his horse gently, and rode off toward the rising sun. The grass bowed beneath him. The wind carried the scent of wild flowers and old dust. Somewhere, a hawk cried overhead. And in that hush, before the day fully began, justice had come and gone, like a passing storm. The light kept stretching, swallowing the last of the shadows, and over the wide, endless plains, Ethan Crowley disappeared into peace. Sometimes, justice comes late, and when it does, it doesn't heal all wounds. Ethan Crowley may have cleared his name, but he'll carry the scars of being hunted, hated, and nearly broken by a truth no one wanted to hear. This story reminds us that being innocent doesn't mean you'll be believed, and being brave doesn't mean you won't be alone. But holding on to what's right, even when the world calls you wrong, that's what separates a man from the dust he rides through. Truth doesn't shout, it waits, and only those who listen beyond the noise will ever hear it. What about you? Have you ever been misunderstood or wrongly judged? Tell us in the comments. We want to hear your story. If this story made you stop and think, comment the number 1 down below. Let us know what state you're watching from, and if you enjoy true stories from the Wild West, don't forget to subscribe to True Wild West Stories so you never miss the next ride.